Well, since some of you haven't used it before, well, first I'll just go ahead and introduce myself. My name's Chelsea, and I am a teacher in Salinas, California, and I've taught a lot of different things, or still teach a lot of different things, but the things that I've taught the longest are physics and environmental science. So I've been using positive physics since 2020, I believe, and have really enjoyed it. And then a couple years ago, I mentioned to Jack Replinger, who started this site, that I would love it if there was something like this for my environmental science class. That AP Environmental Science, I've noticed, and maybe you guys have noticed too, that there's a big quantitative portion to the classes of being able to do calculations and be able to interpret graphs and use data. And I noticed that some of my students, even who were maybe very strong, hi, welcome, we're just getting started. Hi, Liz. But I noticed that some of my students who were even really strong in their math classes or in my physics class were really struggling with the math in environmental science. And I just, like, knowing my students, know that this is something that they could be really good at, that they could master if they just had more practice with it. And this format of positive physics, positive STEM is really great for giving kids like instant feedback on if they're getting it right or wrong, if they're on the right track. I love also that the numbers are randomized. So when we write the questions, I'll show you guys some examples in a little bit, then everything is, let's let another person in here. The numbers are randomized from kid to kid so that they can help each other. And I'll kind of give you guys some examples of that. So I'm going to go to my dashboard and show you what this looks like. Also, anyone feel free to jump in and interrupt if you want to ask a question or get clarification. I made for the class, and it is still a work in progress. I've been working on this for the last couple of years, but like really the last 1 year, just under a year, I've been working more consistently on it. And so we have units that go along with all of the topics, all of the units for the course exam description that the College Board has put together for AP Environmental Science. So if you're in review mode right now, we'll talk about like some suggestions of how you could use this to review. You might want to just start with Unit 10 review, since we don't have time to redo the whole class. This is a little longer than I would normally make the units, but I put in here a skill for environmental legislation. This one is not a math-based skill, so I'm going to focus on the math-based skills in a second, but I'll show you guys this. So you might know that for the AP exam, the kids are responsible for knowing some different laws and treaties. And this, I have like all of the 10 different, let me reset it so you see what it is. So here's another thing about the site if you haven't used it yet. It turns green when you get it right. And then if you don't get it right, you can keep doing it over and over again. So I'll have a question: which piece of US legislation is also known as the Superfund Act? This act of Congress established a tax on high polluting industries like petroleum and uses those funds to clean up old hazardous waste sites. So I can click on here, and then there's all these different choices. We already saw from what the answer was when I opened it, but if a kid picked the wrong answer, their best guess, it just puts a little, I should have pressed check answer, but it just puts a little X in the corner if they get it wrong, and shows that they need to try again. And then when you get it right and check your answer, it'll turn light green if you got it right eventually, and it turns bright green if you get it right on your first try. So that's the legislation review. That's a little skill that you can do, that you can assign to your students on here. I'm going to show you through the math part, because that's like really the, I think, most valuable thing about this website and what I have been working on and what I'm excited to share with you guys. So I'm moving to the Unit 8 review. And what I just was going to show you, hang on. Let's make this a little smaller. So I put together a formula sheet for all of the different equations that are used throughout the course. And different units that they probably need to be aware of. So they don't need to memorize every unit there is, but they do need to know, for instance, that 1 kilowatt is equal to 1,000 watts. And so these are all of the different all of the different formulas for the whole class. And so I put this as the lesson, and so they can click back and forth to this if they're doing a problem. So I'm going to go through these different problems, these 9 problems for Unit 8, and show you kind of how this works as a targeted math review. So I just backtrack for a second. Those are all the things that I made that I wanted to have positive environmental science for. I wanted to have it for my students to have this like way to practice and master the math problems on the AP exam. For targeted review, the AP exam is in 2 weeks from today, and we are coming up to that. So we don't have unlimited amounts of time. We have 2 weeks. The way we could think about targeted review a couple of different ways. So one is you could think about a skill that you know that you didn't practice enough during the year, or you're worried you didn't practice enough during the year. So I'm going to show you as an example math practice. And we can work on that skill leading up to the AP exam to kind of cram that skill. I'm going to share this with you guys in a little bit too. Let me see. I'm still, screen sharing this. Now, did you guys see this switch to the Google Doc? Yeah. Okay. Thanks. So I will share this with you guys if you want also. This is somebody else's study plan, diagnostic study plan. So after the students take one of the practice exams, there's Google Docs on our AP teachers websites. I don't know if you guys have seen this before, that the students can then evaluate themselves on what skills that they need to practice. So they could find out their percent correct for each of these units in the course, and then they could make their own study plan using positive environmental science as a tool in their toolkit to be able to review those topics. Or they could think about, and this also sorts it by science practices. So the science practices are the things that are woven all into the course all year, and that's where the math and data analysis comes in. So the science practices 5 and 6 are the data analysis and the mathematical routines, and those together are over 20% of what's tested on the AP exam. So those are things that you don't want to sleep on. You don't want to forget about that. We spend a lot of time in our class with labs. The scientific experiments, which are important too, that's 8% of the exam. So if we spend so much time doing labs and it's only 8% of the test, we really should be also devoting a lot of time in class or outside of class to learning the science practices of analyzing data and doing these mathematical routines. It's a really important part of learning to think like a scientist. So back to how we can practice this. On Unit 8, or my Unit 8 review, I'm looking at this dissolved oxygen curve on here. So this is a randomized, let me shorten my little screen again. This is a randomized curve here. So everyone's will look slightly different. So they'll have a different randomized data set. And there's some parts of the question, this is randomized too. Everything in blue is randomized. So this one says it's downstream from a concentrated animal feeding operation where we would have this dip in dissolved oxygen because of the biological oxygen demand of anaerobic or aerobic bacteria. So there's some of this content knowledge as well. And so we're going to look for some of these questions as content review. And where is the biochemical oxygen demand the highest? It would be here at the 10-meter mark, where it's inverse to the dissolved oxygen. So we're reviewing this content. and you can just have the students check their answers as they go. The initial level, so everyone will be able to check this on their own graph and see what these are and read the graph to see what their units should be. So all of this is stuff that they want to be able to practice. And then read where the new oxygen is. So at 10 meters, let's move my little cursor, 3.155 is the dissolved oxygen content at that low point. I'm gonna leave it here. One thing I've had people ask is how many significant figures they should put in. On the site, the default is 3 significant figures, but it doesn't mark it wrong if you use more or less than that, as long as you're within like a range of the numbers. It's usually set to like 2.5%. And now we have a little calculation practice. What is the percent change in dissolved oxygen? So percent change is one of the most commonly asked math questions on the AP exam throughout this course, and it's a really useful calculation to have students do in labs throughout the year. The Desmos calculator is a little link that's built into here. You might want to have your own students use the calculator that they're planning to use on the AP test so that they practice that and have that in their hands. But this is handy if they don't want to get out a calculator. So I'm going to set up this equation for a percent change. This is our new minus old over old. So our new number in this case would be the dissolved oxygen at 10 meters. And then our old one is 9, and then divided by 9. And I have this percent decrease, a negative number. And so I will type that in over here, negative 64.9%. And so we've like practiced some content and we've practiced some calculations. Here's another graph. So in like science practices 5 and 6 that we're practicing with this. This one is showing the relationship between dissolved oxygen and temperature, but the part that's randomized is that there's different temperatures, this change here. So this is saying if the temperature of water discharged from a power plant is 38 degrees Celsius, what is the maximum dissolved oxygen content of the water? So water that's hotter can hold less dissolved oxygen, and we can see that in the graph. And so I have at 38 degrees, it's 6.62. I round it degrees, oh, not degrees Celsius, milligrams per liter, and then check my answers. And then this next question is going to be a calculation, and this is a percent question. So sometimes these come up on the AP tests too. Instead of a percent change, using a percent to figure out the amount of the total. So if in addition to thermal pollution, biochemical oxygen demand reduces the dissolved oxygen to 42% saturation, what is the dissolved oxygen concentration? So if it's 42% of its saturation, so that would be taking 42% of something, so 0.42 times that other number. And just again to show, like, if I had gotten this, let's say I put in 2, the answer was 2.78, but let's say I put in 2 milligrams per liter and check the answers, and I didn't get it right, that's okay. It just will change it'll change my accuracy at the end. So I have an accuracy score and a completion score, but it will not change it'll not like keep me from having a high completion score. So your students will be able to see their completion score go up to 100% no matter what they do, but they will have a lower accuracy score, and that's great feedback for you as the teacher to know if there's something that all of your students were struggling with that you could go back and explain a little bit more. And then this is also randomized, a follow-up question after this. A benthic shrimp species requires 3 milligrams per liter of dissolved oxygen to survive. Will the shrimp survive the thermal pollution event? So since we calculated that it would be 2.78 and the shrimp needs 3, then it would not survive. And then we'll keep going, a couple other things. So this one is a half-life problem, and half-life is usually something that we practice with nuclear power, but it's good to, I like doing it again when we're talking about persistent organic pollutants because it's great to like be able to revisit that skill and that idea. And so this one, it says a persistent organic pollutant that was used for textile manufacturing has an estimated half-life in soil and water of 21 years. If 550 kilograms of this persistent organic pollutant were released from a factory in 1992, how much is still present in 2013? So this is helping them look for these patterns that sometimes they'll get asked about in this class. It already told us the half-life is 21 years, and then it's giving us 2 years that are 21 years apart. So we're really being asked like how much is going to be left in one half-life. So it's just going to be half of that amount that they gave us. And everything blue again is randomized. I'm going to do this on my calculator just to check. And then a follow-up question that's also content related. So reviewing content again, that neurotoxin would be reduced brain function. And then here's one. I think I'm going to go through these next ones without doing the whole problem, but just kind of give you guys some more examples of all the different types of math that we're seeing and that kids are getting a chance to practice. So this is a problem to show just some sample numbers of what kinds of concentrations would be found in the food web of this one is saying DDT in the ecosystem. So this is based on like ranges of DDT that might be found in different ecosystems, but randomized as well. That there's more in the tertiary consumers, it goes up at each level, but it's not at a consistent amount. And then this is a type of question that comes up sometimes. How many times greater is one value compared to another value? And I believe I have that on the lesson section. This times more when you're solving for it. You're looking at the larger amount divided by the smaller amount. So in the case of this one, how many times greater is the concentration of DDT in a secondary consumer compared to a primary consumer? So I would be doing 1.6, my greater number, divided by 0.1, my smaller number. So 16 times greater. And then if you didn't answer all the questions, you can still click to the next one. So that was a question about bioaccumulation or biomagnification up a food web. And then this one is contrasting that same kind of question, but bioaccumulation in one species, one individual through its life. So another chance to read a graph and interact with that data and have that same kind of times greater question. Okay, so now finally getting to one example of the second most common type of math that they'll see on the AP exam, which is a unit analysis problem. So on the lesson tab, the way we think about unit analysis is you want to start with a given and then multiply by factors so that the units on top and the units on bottom cancel each other out. I just heard recently from another AP reader that it's not going to be as important going forward that students show their units on the unit analysis problems, but it really helps them. It's like almost impossible to get those points without doing it because it really helps them to be able to see how they're supposed to set things up. So I'm going to do this landfill problem. I don't know if any of you recognize it if you've been teaching this class for a while, but there's an FRQ from a long time ago about landfill and the amount of leachate collected. So we're going to walk through how we would think about this as a unit analysis problem. And there's unit analysis problems in pretty much every unit. So if you do this throughout the school year next year, you can practice it all year long. So I have this one. First, there's a surface area of 2,200 meters squared and an average 300 millimeters of rain per year. So first, find the annual rainfall in meters given units. So I'm going to change that 300 to 0.3. And then what is the volume of water that falls on the landfill each year? So I'm going to look at the units, and this is how I teach it to my students. So this, like, the drop downs provide a really good scaffolding for the kids to like think through how they need to set up their problem until they can build up the skill to be able to do those on paper by themselves when they're practicing free response questions. So looking at volume of water per year. So figuring out what you want to end up with. Okay, I want to end up with meters cubed per year. So I want years on the bottom. I can pick meters on the top. And then I'm going to have meters squared over here so that I end up with meters squared plus meter squared times meter to get the cubic meter. And then check and make sure that all those units work before we put in the numbers. And then I'll use this 2200 from the surface area and 0.3 from the annual rainfall. So that's per year. And then I just have to set it up in the calculator to make sure that that works. So 660 cubic meters per year. There's follow-up questions here too about percents. So what percent, asking about if a certain percent infiltrates the landfill, if 22% runs off, and then if the leachate collection system is only 87% efficient. So you could have those follow-up questions too, but I just wanted to show that unit analysis problem before we get too far. If unit analysis specifically is something that you want to work on, let me just actually check if there's anything else I was going to show you guys. Oh, I did want to show you guys the dose response curve. So another unit 8 thing that's really useful and important is understanding LD50 or dose response curves. So this one is just finding out, and these numbers are randomized on here too. So the curve kind of fits two different answers. So which of these doses is lethal to 50% of the population? To read these graphs, you want to go to 50% mortality and then go along the curve until you intersect it. So 8 and then milligrams per kilogram body weight is the answer for this one. 8 milligrams per kilogram. And that's the LD50 dose. So we have that to practice, and then another LD50 calculation with a different problem here where you'll use that LD50 level to help from the graph to calculate the dose that's lethal to those individuals. And then this one is a percent problem to practice. So lots of different math problems to practice from just that one unit. Usually if you're working on this throughout the school year, it's not so chaotic that there would be, for each of those problems that I showed you, there'd be 4 to 8 more questions from that skill that they would practice like all at once. And if you want them to practice a specific math skill, the semester review that I made for unit 1 or the fall semester, units 1 through 5. This one's set up a little bit differently. And it has all of the math sorted out. So the percent change is its own skill and unit analysis is its own skill. So if you're targeting review to your students and trying to find the skills that they need to work on, you could specifically focus on just unit analysis or just percent change. Population, that's unit 3, has a lot of its own formulas. Unit 6, which is energy, also has a lot of its own formulas. So that's all in short how you could give assigned math practice to your students if that's something that you want to work on. I know we have 2 weeks left. I have 5 times more that I'll see my kids, but I just assigned that unit 10 review to be due for my students on the morning of May 9th. So I will go in and check their scores. Let me show you, speaking of that, how I would check their scores. So you go to teacher, student scores, and then I will make sure I'm in the right course and pick the block that I'm looking at. So I can see that they've started it, but I'm gonna look at, so I'll be able to see their completion scores and their final scores. Another way to target review is if you've used the site before, or if you've been using it all year, you can go back and look and see how your students did on different topics. So I would go to, I know that this unit 4 was a tricky one. It's always a tricky one for my students. I'm going to click accuracy scores, and then I can see on here specific ones. I know that they had a lot harder time here on Hadley cells, our ENSO diagrams, and ENSO maps and climate maps. So once I see that those were the ones that are tricky, I can like make a little note to myself that I want them to redo that. And I will go to that skill that they've already done. And I can reset it for all of them. This is also kind of new that they, we can see when they opened the skill and how long they worked on it, which is very helpful. So I'm gonna reset it. So now it's all back to 0 for everyone. And I could tell them when I see them, like, that was something you guys really struggled with. I want you to try it again. We're gonna use class time to work on that one again. Or you guys can do it for homework. I don't know if I'll actually make them do this for homework because with Hadley cells, I tried to reteach it again recently and they were still having a hard time. So we might just move on from that one. That might be not one we do this year. Okay, so that's my second tip. So first way to target review by skill that you want them to practice. So for math, this is great. Second way, looking back at their accuracy scores, or if you haven't been using the site, if you just want to use your unit test scores, go back to your unit tests and see what topics that they had a hard time. And then the last way, I've already kind of showed you guys this diagnostic worksheet, is to give a practice exam, which would be in your audit account from AV Classroom, and then use that as a worksheet for students to decide on their own skills. Or if you have something like ZipGrade, you could look at the data. I don't know if anyone else has that or uses that. It's great to look at your data. So this is like a previous test I have where I just scan the tests as they come in, and then I have information. I have data on like the percent that got correct for each of the questions, and then I can decide if I have time to go over something for the whole class, the questions that were missed the most, or the topics that were missed the most. I know it's just been me talking a lot. Okay, one other thing I was going to show you guys besides the math. So there's also within the review and within all of these units, conceptual things. One of the big skills, or probably the biggest skill for the whole AP exam, is environmental problems and solutions. So within all of the skills or units, but probably especially starting with unit 5. So thinking about units 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. There's a lot of introduction of problems. So for instance, in unit 6, we learn about how fossil fuels have their own problems, and maybe a solution to that is using renewable energy. But renewable energy also has its own problems, but maybe those problems have also their own solutions. And so there's always like this cycle of learning about the problems and solutions. So the renewable pros and cons is an example I have of this, where you can assign these for just students to get introduced to the idea of something and its pros and cons. These pros and cons here are only shuffled in order. So they all have the same list of things, just not in the same order. And then the questions themselves are scrambled in their order. So it's a little harder to just do it next to someone and write everything that they write, but a little less randomized than the actual variables being different. So in this problem or this question, it's asking about or giving an introduction of what solar panels are and asking students to identify that as photovoltaic solar. And then with these pros and cons here, they are sorting the pros and cons into things like economic drawback or economic benefit, environmental benefit, or negative environmental consequence. Some of these also have for renewable energies geographic limitations. And I found that for my students, it gave them a lot of confidence this year for writing FRQs when they saw questions like, given economic benefit of this, that they also had been used to assigning that to things like that are, giving someone money or related to adding money to a community. And so they were comfortable coming up with those answers, or thinking about a negative ecological consequence. They had been like comfortable seeing examples of what counts as a negative ecological consequence. So I had these for all our different types of renewable energies. And so creating jobs for farmers, that would be an example of an economic benefit. Driving up the cost of food because of competition with food crops, that might be an economic drawback. And so then they can check their answers and talk about those things and then just get a little bit more confidence before going into free response questions. So that might be another skill to target. And I feel like I talked about all the things I wanted to talk about, but I didn't really ask for questions on the way. Did anyone want to ask any other specific questions? I can also share with you guys I made this shareable so I could just send you the link if you would like this specific one, this Google Doc. I can put this in the chat. So you can use that with your students if you want to. Also, if you wanted to use that formula sheet on paper, actually, I don't know, maybe actually Abby also is a positive physics person. So maybe if I was going to print something, I wanted to do it from my formula sheet. Hang on, got distracted. So clicking on one of these math skills that had that formula sheet, can I just do that, like right click print and then?
Yeah.
Okay. So we'll see how it's coming up. Okay, so that printed it onto pages for me, which would be great. Then your students could see that on paper if you would like to print anything. Abby, do you have anything to add or any closing thoughts?
I'm just going to put the link to the website in the chat as well, in case anyone wants to check that out right now. The environmental science course is totally free at the moment. So you can make an account, you can use it with your students. That's all totally free. So feel free to go ahead and do that. And if you need any help setting up your account, we have excellent customer service. So on the website, there's Jack is the person who made the website originally. His email address is everywhere. So if you either send him an email or there's a little chat box as well, you can send a chat message to ask for help getting anything set up. But yeah, we're always open to hearing questions or feedback or whatever. So please send that if you have any.
I just want to jump in and say, yeah, as Jason's saying there as well, thank you so much. At the moment, I love this. This seems good. My students struggle with the math there, but a big thing is they struggle with the confidence in it. And I really like the randomization feature of this in particular. This helps, just so they aren't copying, incentivizes them to actually individualize things, just because one, trying to build stuff individually one by one means I have just a mishmash of stuff all the time, but also there's just so much stuff online
Yes,
out there for different answers. I was just grading
absolutely.
like just the practice test FRQs, and it was so disappointing just finding like, okay, all right, this is Quizlets, this is from the official rubric, this was AI,
Ugh,
these
yeah.
ones they did themselves, and just even seeing it across an individual student through as they piece stuff together.
Yeah, it's so exhausting, but it's really that's yeah. One of the things that I heard from a student from me from recently when like we were doing stuff in positive environmental science, and she's like, I guess with your class, I just might as well learn it because you're gonna make me learn it anyway. I got to keep answering these questions until I get it right. And yeah, haven't had issues yet with students cheating. They haven't figured out their way around it just yet for being able to just copy each other or paste it into ChatGPT, that they kind of have to show their steps and figure things out. And then like you're saying, like getting that confidence so that they don't have to cheat. So when they get to the test,
Yes.
they don't feel like they have to cheat because they've like, obviously I can do this.
Yeah, that's really good. So, one question there. So you,
Yeah.
I guess, are you one of the ones building these sets here? Uh,
Yeah, just me.
is there
But
is there options to like customize the questions or like add in your own stuff based
there
on
is
things?
actually, maybe Abby, can you speak to that a little bit?
Yes, yeah. So we have a new feature. Chelsea, if you click on advanced, you'll have this option in your account as well. So there's a few things you can do here. The first thing is create questions and lessons. So that'll take you to do you want to click on that, Chelsea, and we'll just show, oh, you already did.
Yeah.
Awesome. So there's a little example question shown there of how you could set up this like kind of basic code to make your own randomized questions. So you can make your own questions that you can, if you want to make something not randomized, you can just type it in and have a really simple question as well. And you can, if you go back to the advanced tab, Chelsea, the second one down, create courses, units, and skills. So there's two things you can do there. You could make your own course and add your own questions that you created. Another thing you can do is clone an existing course and then edit stuff. So where it says clone unit or clone skill, if you want, you could clone Chelsea's environmental science class, and then you could add stuff or remove stuff or kind of really personalize it if you want to. Yeah.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah, all those things. And then if you're just getting the site right now too, actually, Abby, I don't know where we would put it, but there's like, if you have the free course, I think you put in review as an activation code, and then you can get the whole site of the parts of the course or the parts of the website that are paid, you would still then have access to for the rest of the school year.
Yeah, and we'll put that, we'll send out an email afterwards and we'll make sure we include the activation code. So if you teach physics or chemistry or anything else that you wanted to use it for, you could try it out for the rest of the year and see if you like it as well.
Yes.
Okay. I was actually thinking, I don't teach physics, but I'm close with some physics and chemistry teachers
Oh
that I
yeah.
think would like some of this as well.
Yes, I think it's really helpful if like kind of your whole department gets on board with it. I know like we're all facing these same struggles that you were talking about of students kind of checking out and copying and finding the answers everywhere. And then they like get to use it, students get to use it kind of across different classes and get comfortable with it too as a tool. But I love it for physics. Physics was the what it was originally made for. So if you tell your physics friends too.
Yeah. And I guess, sorry to be dominating here, but
no, it's fine.
just for Abby, I guess the question is, how much does this cost?
Good question. So when you go to the website, there's a button that says like get a quote, and if you click on that, you'll be able to kind of put in how many teachers you have, how many classes you each have, and it will come up with a quote for you. But we also do have pay what you can pricing. So if your school can't afford it or say they won't pay, you can decide how much you want to pay. And there's been a teacher who's paid $12 for their account for the whole year. Some people might pay $50 or $100. I think the full blown account, depending on how many teachers and students you have, it's like somewhere between like $200 and $500 a teacher, depending on what you have. And if you have like a group that's getting together to set up accounts, if you email Jack, the guy whose email address is ever on the website, he'll be happy to work with you to get like a tailor-made quote that will work for you and your school.
Here on the front.
Yeah, so this like the Jack at Positive Physics has, will help you out of figuring out how to make that work for your school. But it really is like ridiculously affordable compared to a lot of other sites. And so far the environmental science is still free. So because I'm still working it out.
All right. That sounds great. I'm going to be looking into this immediately. And this is actually like just what I'm needing right now. I've identified
so happy to hear
specifically that math is one of the things that they're struggling with, and they gloss over with it. And I haven't really been able to find what my colleague calls like low ego investment stuff that really good practice for it. I use things like Gimkit and Quizzes for a lot of these things,
Okay.
specifically for that sort of practice.
Yeah.
So,
Anyone else have any more questions or thoughts? Jeff, thanks so much for chiming in and great to talk about it. Thanks. Okay, well, thank you guys for coming. And my email is also on here, like this about the author, chelseastare@gmail.com. So if you want to check in afterwards about anything else, let me know. If you have ideas for things that you think would be a good skill that you're not finding on here, or if you are thinking of something you want your kids to practice and you can't really find where it is, anything like that, I could answer for you. So. All right, thank you.